Hi, Clive. Thank you very much for joining us today. To get us started, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Daniel, and thanks a lot for inviting me along. So I'm Clive Mitchell. I'm Head of Terrestrial Science at NatureScot. As NatureScot, we are the Scottish Government's advisors on nature and wildlife and climate. And uh, as well as being Head of Terrestrial Science, I lead our work on climate nature and consider that to be all one word because of the way that the Earth works as a system.
In your experience, why is it important for researchers to engage with parliaments? And how does this differ from engaging with governments, for example?
I suppose depending on how governments work or governance systems work, then I suppose I'd start from the point that most governments are formed from parliaments. So and then governments formulate policy and drive practice and so forth. And the role of the parliament then is to scrutinise that policy and practice. And sometimes governments respond to that advice and sometimes they don't. There's a role for researchers then to present their evidence as written evidence into inquiries concerning new legislation, and indeed then potentially to appear as witnesses before committees to state their case.
Do you have any specific guidance or specific tips for researchers to effectively deliver written and oral evidence to these parliamentary committees?
Often it's worth a chat with the clerks to see, to test out what insights they have in terms of particular issues or angles that the committee might be interested in or concerns that they have and so on. The written guidance is normally kind of 2 to 4 pages, pretty short. So you've got to be pretty sharp on getting your messages across. And don't feel if you've only got sort of 1 or 2 pages worth of stuff to say, then saying in 1 or 2 pages, don't feel obliged to stretch it out to the 2 or 4 page limit or whatever. Say what you need to say it clearly, say it loudly, and move on. And then in terms of the oral evidence, it's worth doing your homework to find out who's on the committee and what their interests are, what the kind of lines of questions are likely to be, and obviously being able to answer the questions.
You have experience providing evidence to Westminster and Holyrood parliamentary committees. Can you think of an example where research had an impact on decision making in this context?
I suppose from a NatureScot point of view, all of our advice is grounded in the evidence that we have available. So that's kind of paramount. I was also thinking of people like Kevin Anderson from the Tyndall Centre on Climate Change. He has a particularly kind of no-nonsense, direct style of delivery, so very numerate and confident with the numbers and able to explain them in a very clear, precise way about what the implications are of different political choices that might be made, and indeed whether the sum total of the proposed action is indeed adequate to the job that needs to be done. And I think that parliamentarians and committees and so on respond really well to people like that. So I think it's a combination of both the quality of the evidence, but also the sort of charisma of the individuals presenting it in a way that brings it to life. So when I worked at the Sustainable Development Commission, there was a strong tendency then to try to give messages to politicians that were kind of palatable and were positive and emphasise the potential and the opportunity to act. But I think the risk of that is that what gets lost is the scale and the magnitude of the problem that you're trying to address. Multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approaches are absolutely vital, because even while many of the problems are rooted in, for example, natural science perspectives, it is nevertheless true that it's mainly people that have brought those conditions about, and it's going to be people who are going to bring about the conditions for acting upon them and addressing them. And so you don't really include people in the framing of the problem, either at the outset or at the end, or in the middle, preferably all of them. then you're going to run into problems in terms of translating that research and that evidence into policy and practice.